This video is brought to you by the Great IT Professional. Find out more about the free subscription that comes with your PMI New Jersey membership.
Scrum has three roles. The first role is the product owner, and we're going to get into detail about each of these as we go over. But right now, I just want to take the time and just share with you, what those roles are. And let me move this out of the way over here. Scrum Master is another role, and that's basically, this is what's recognized by the Scrum Guide. And the final role is the actual Scrum team. So when you're working with a Scrum project, you're only dealing with three roles. There are 5 events. Now, this is a picture of Scrum. You've probably seen similar things like this. So the first event in Scrum is sprint planning. And that's where actually the product owner tells the Scrum team what they want to build. The next event would be the daily Scrum. That's when the team gets together. Another event is the sprint review. That's where you show off. That's where everybody shows off their work. The sprint retrospective is basically a final event where the team actually reflects as far as what they did over the last sprint, what they can improve. And then finally, the sprint itself is considered an event. And then there are 3 artifacts. The first artifact would be the product backlog. The next one would be the sprint backlog. And the final one would be the actual increment. This could be something that's potentially shippable or something that's actually moved to production. And basically, that's it. That is Scrum. If you're not including these in the work that you're doing today, you're not following Scrum. So in order to be doing Scrum properly, you have to have 5 events, 3 roles, and 3 artifacts. And now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into each of these areas. Any questions so far?
Yeah.
Just a quick thing, Bob, before we go. The third role is actually dev team, not Scrum team. So I think the Scrum team is the product owner, Scrum Master, and the dev team.
Okay, thanks. That's good.
Yeah, I've heard of sprint ceremonies. Is that the events?
Yes. When you're looking at the different events in Scrum, that would be sprint planning. That would be the daily Scrum, the sprint review. Those are all events along with the sprint retrospective. So those are events. And an artifact is like a hard copy deliverable, something that you could touch and feel, where you have the backlog. The sprint backlog is what the dev team volunteers for. And then finally, the increment. So those are the 3 artifacts. Did that clarify that question?
Well, I was wondering how the ceremonies fit in there, but I think that's the same as events.
That's when you say ceremony, that is what Scrum calls it, is an event. An event could be a ceremony as well. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
All right. This comes from the Agile Coaching Institute, and this basically gives a picture of the different roles in Scrum. And what you see here is the 3 roles that I just described, where the product owner focuses on the team's purpose, the Scrum Master focuses on the team's autonomy, and then the dev team is actually the one that's doing all the work. And when you look, and if you look in the Scrum Guide, this is not recognized as far as part of Scrum, but in reality, there are Agile managers. The developers actually report to managers on the dev team, and the managers want to kind of get in the way. Like a lot of times when you start having problems, it could be because the managers are getting too involved. Where the product owner should be providing the direction, sometimes these managers start jumping in and start distracting the team. So that's just things to be aware of. So really the managers are not part of Scrum. So Nitin, would you like to describe the product owner?
Yeah, sure. So the product owner is such a key role over here. They are truly bringing the vision of what is to be built. They are ideally empowered in the organization, and they're trusted because they're really doing a juggling act between a multitude of stakeholders and interacting with the dev team. And with that, their time is really important. They must be available. if you want to have a great product owner, that's one of the things they really, really strive for. And yet they are fully vested in the product. They can lay out a possible roadmap and look a little ahead. And they're truly the voice of the customer. One thing to remember is this is not a committee. This is one person, and one person alone who can say yay or nay at the end of your typical 2-week cycle to say, yep, this is what was requested, and yes, this is built, so we declare it done. Bob has a few things to watch out for. So, you know, someone who's respected isn't just someone who's taking orders like, hey, this is what we want, this one, but someone who can kind of push back as well or present some options to the stakeholders. And certainly, yes, articulate the what. What is it that we need? But stay away from the nuts and bolts of the why. Trust the dev team to actually do the implementation. So that's a bit of the product owner.
Okay. Next would be the Scrum Master. And pretty much, I'm an Agile coach. I'm also a Scrum Master. I enjoy being a Scrum Master. I end up teaching other Scrum Masters how to actually help the team do better. And basically, to get a good Scrum Master, you need somebody that's mature enough that really understands what the team's doing. Like, you can't get somebody right out of college and expect them to be a Scrum Master. They have to have some experience. I come with a project management background, and I find that it works out really well when we're dealing with the PMO. And in order to do a good job, you have to really understand what the Agile values and principles are. And tonight, we're not going to get into that. That would be a future session that we would cover. But in order to be a Scrum Master, you have to understand what it is you're being a master of. So, and what this is Scrum that we're talking about tonight. And basically, as a Scrum Master, as you advance, you actually end up coaching, mentor, training, and facilitating. And there's two things that you've probably seen in job recs where they look for a servant leader or a catalyst leader. And to me, the servant leader isn't somebody that provides coffee. It's somebody that actually helps team members so that they grow and that they're better than they were when you started. So my job is to make my team better and help them really be a fully integrated, self-organizing team and help them figure out how to do it themselves. Ultimately, I don't want them to need me. I want them to be self-sufficient and go on their journey. And I'll come back and help and coach and stuff like that. And a catalyst leader makes the job fun. That's where basically you bring innovation. Like when the team's working, how can you make the team more efficient? How can we communicate better? Those are the kinds of things you're always thinking about. And then the things to look out for. You can usually tell if the Scrum Master and the product owner don't get along. And also if the Scrum Master and the team don't get along. That's a red flag. They have to be an expert. They have to really understand Scrum. And they can't really get that by going to a 2-day class. They actually have to work it and be in the trenches with teams. And basically, a lot of Scrum Masters don't know when to get out of the way. And what that means is, once the team gets going, step back, let them work, let them figure it out. It's okay if they make mistakes. And your job is to always protect the team. And if you come as a PM from a PM profession, you have to get out of that command and control mentality and actually get into the servant leader type of thing, where you're not telling the team what to do. You're basically enabling them. So that's the Scrum Master. And then Nitin, maybe you can do the dev team.
Yeah, sure. And Bob, that's some great points you had there very quickly on the Scrum Master. The teaching, facilitating, coaching, mentoring, can't specify that enough. And also just want to talk a little bit about self-organizing, because the Scrum Guide does not really explicitly say what self-organizing is. If you were to ever interview a potential Scrum Master in your team, just say, hey, what does self-organizing look like? And there are 3 things that thought leaders are looking for. What are your team agreements? What are your norms? And a conflict resolution model. If you have these 3, this is going to help. And with that, this blends into the dev team. So the dev team are made up of a lot of people with a breadth of knowledge, and they're sometimes described as having T-shaped skills. If you just kind of lift your arms up like a T, you can tap someone on your left or right, but you're also very deep in one area. There are no senior developers or directors or executives. Scrum intentionally just says members of the dev team, because the idea is to be working as one. Self-organizing, again, is what is it that needs to be done? We're experts. Let us execute. So you trust the team. And then cross-functional is, again, you're deep into a certain realm, but you can always lean on each other if needed. Technology evolves and changes. Sometimes you have to keep up, and sometimes you just have to realize you cannot do it all. So again, they might have some specialized skills, but they can lean on each other. You have to remember that Dr. Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber came from the armed forces. You know, former U.S. Air Force Top Gun is Dr. Jeff Sutherland, and Ken Schwaber from the Merchant Navy. So we want to make sure that we honor also the lessons they took from the field. Two people are better than one, and a core small team working as a unit is going to do much more when you trust them. Next one, Bob. And yeah, with that comes mutual respect. You want to volunteer, so it's a pull-based system instead of people pushing work towards the dev team. And you just want to articulate what your goal is at sprint planning so people remain focused. Next, Bob.
Sure. And the key to add to what Nitin said is sometimes on a team you might have like a tech lead, and sometimes the tech lead starts telling everybody what to do. And that's something that you have to look out for, because basically the team should be volunteering. They don't get assignments. And that's all part of living by the principles, where basically you're working at a sustainable pace. All right, now we're going to do our first poll. So I'm going to stop sharing. Let's see. All right, so basically you should have a question in front of you. The first question is, which Scrum event allows the product owner to prioritize what the development team will work on next? I'm sorry, I launched the wrong poll. I was messing around with it, and I was at number 3. This is the first one. Who is the decision maker regarding what features the product owner will have? Can everybody see the poll?
Yeah.
Okay. You should be able to answer these questions. And then as the people answer, you'll see the results come through. How are we doing? Can everybody see my screen? Can everybody see this? The poll right now?
No.
No. Yes.
Okay.
No, we can't see that.
Well, okay. Well, I'll go over the answers. Who is the decision maker regarding what features the product will have, and the product owner? That is correct. Everybody got that 100%, and 12 people answered. The next one is the role. Who has total authority over how the work gets done? And basically, that is the development team. The Scrum Master and the product owner end up supporting the team. The product owner sets what the team is going to build, but the team figures it out. They determine how. And the Scrum Master is there basically just to protect the team and facilitate the process. So the people that didn't get that role correct, is that clear now? Are we okay? That it's the development team that has total authority?
Yep.
Okay, the next one is, who does anything possible to help the team perform at their highest level? And everybody got that correct. That is the Scrum Master. And then how are we doing? So far, everybody's giving us 4s and 5s. Thank you. And that's our first poll. Oh, I could have shared the results. I'm sorry. I'm learning this myself too. So now you can see the results.
We can see it now.
Okay, thank you. I'll get it right the next time. I've gone to a lot of these Zoom meetings, but I haven't facilitated that many. So this is a journey for everybody. All right. All right, now we're going to talk about artifacts. And so Nitin, I've been doing a lot of talking. Why don't you get started here?
Sure. I've been a former product owner, so I certainly enjoy this. So your product backlog is a wish list. This is what captures the desires, the requirements, and if you're mature enough and you have a large initiative, you have a release plan. There are some smaller teams and startups that don't necessarily need a release plan. Requirements are captured in what are known as PBIs, or product backlog items. And again, Scrum intentionally keeps it at a high level and vague because not everything is what people commonly know as a user story. So you could have defects, bugs, spikes, and anything and everything that goes into what gets into your product increment. The top of the backlog is clear and work to be pulled. Whereas as you go a little down, things could be a little fuzzy, which is okay and quite acceptable, towards reaching the bottom. At any time, people can add to this backlog. It is intended to be open and transparent, but this is where things really start off. If there's anything that the development team thinks about or from the business, this is where it is captured.
And this basically is just an example. If you were using Jira, this is just one way of capturing the backlog as far as what Nitin just described. And what's nice about it is you're not, you don't have to retype things. You just basically take your mouse and drag and drop, the different items so that you can change the order based on the business requirements that you hear.
Right, and very quickly, you don't typically hear about requirements as a high, medium, low, because then you get into all kinds of other variations. This is a medium high or a medium low. No, we want to be absolutely clear. What is it that the dev team should work on first? And that is on the top of the backlog. And Jira is just an example of additional metadata. So you see the release here. You can see some color coordination. You can see the developers. You can see some sort of a point structure. So for each product backlog item, you can have some relevant information for the team or the organization.
All right, and then the backlog, like Nitin mentioned, it's created with there's a term called user stories, but they're actually, a lot of people call them stories when it's in the backlog, but they really should be called PBIs, product backlog items. And here's a little bit of a Dilbert cartoon for you. I'm not going to read the Dilbert cartoon, but basically, as a user story template would be, as a particular user, I want this feature so that I get this value. It's pretty straightforward. And to put it in just straight English, it's like, who are we building it for? What is it we're trying to create, and why is it valuable? And basically the thought process behind this is, if we don't know who, what, and why, don't even talk to the dev team yet, because basically you don't really know what you want. So that's pretty much the basis of what builds those items that were shown in that list in the previous screen.
Yeah, and just to supplement what you said, user stories actually came from another flavor of agility called extreme programming, or XP. So there might be some references there if you ever go check or online or talk to other members of the dev team. But yeah, it's supposed to be very user-centric. What is it that the end customer truly wants?
And basically what this is describing is, if you're using Jira and Confluence, you can see that it all starts with a vision that the product owner defines. And then what you do is you break the vision down into different themes as far as the types of capabilities that you want. And then that's when you can start actually using Jira to capture the epics and features, which basically is like a group of backlog items. And then basically the PBI that we described, a product backlog item or user story. And then each item should have an acceptance criteria. So in essence, this is the structure, this is the language that you use if you're working with an agile team, which might be a little bit different from other projects that you might have worked on. And you want to talk about that one then? Sure.
Oh, just to say and supplement what you said. So this is just one example from an application called Jira. There are other applications out there as well, but they have some sort of a structure from a high level to a lower level. So you might just see epics and then epics broken down to stories. Or you might see a feature and then an epic, and so on. No matter where you are, every tool is a little bit different, but just know in essence, there's some level of granularity. Well,
and everybody eats breakfast, and I found this online, and I really love this as far as describing the difference between a theme, epic, story, and subtask. So basically, the theme, okay, I want to have breakfast today. That's my theme. That's what I want to eat something. And so basically, so now in order to eat, as you can see, there's options to make toast, to prepare juice, and prepare cereal. So basically, each one of these things, is prep cereal or prep toast or prep juice, would be an epic if you were to actually have it in Jira or in the system. And then in order to prepare cereal, there would be these 3 PBIs, product backlog items or user stories. One would be stir cereal, one would be boil water, and another would be add cereal. So now basically, to have breakfast, you have one epic called cereal. And so basically now we're talking about the stir cereal. Now, when the dev team actually volunteers for it, they'll break stir cereal into subtasks. And this is like work that could be done in maybe 2 to 4 hours, small tasks that they can actually keep track of and volunteer for. And I'll show you some examples of using a Kanban board for that. So basically, to stir cereal, they have to get a spoon, insert a spoon, and move a spoon. Now, if software development was this easy, our lives would be great. But unfortunately, it's a little bit more difficult when it comes to software. But hopefully, this describes the relationships when people are talking about themes, epic stories, and tasks. Did you have anything, Nitin?
no, I'm kind of getting hungry.
Okay. All right. Now, in previous training sessions, people have asked, okay, for the product backlog, what are the different responsibilities? So like it depends on the hat that you're wearing. So if you're coming at it from, say, the product owner, your job is to create the vision and make sure that your items actually align with that vision. And basically, as Nitin had mentioned, it's in an ordered fashion where basically things are showing in a particular order. And then but what you want to do is do the things that provide the most business value first. So you want to put them toward the top of your list. And then in Jira, there's ways to create placeholders and things like that, but we're not going to get into a lot of the Jira mechanics. But what I try to do is when I work with my product owners, I try to help him or her align the different backlog items with different sprints so they can actually start seeing into the future, which actually would help generate a release plan. And then basically the other job of the product owner is to make sure that they're complete, that make sure the acceptance criteria is clear and that they're ready to be worked on by the developer. So pretty much the product owner has the heaviest lifting. Scrum Master, their job is to actually coach and help the product owner get this backlog built and basically how to get it organized and do all the necessary scheduling of future meetings. And then basically as a development team member, you would actually be there asking questions and providing input. Like if a product owner asks for something, there may be some non-functional requirements. So basically you'd need to let the product owner know that in order to provide that function, we have to do these things first.
Yep, and to supplement what Bob has said, something that helps the dev team members is called, sometimes people use the definition of ready. And this is just a joint collaborative effort with the Scrum team members saying, hey, how do we know we can really take this item from the product backlog and move it ahead? Does it have a title? Does it have a basic description? Do we have the acceptance criteria? Do we understand it? So there are a few things that everybody can agree on. And as they just start refining the backlog, it just moves much quicker.
Okay, the next artifact is the sprint backlog. Okay, so now we have a product backlog, and we're going to be talking about the events later. But basically, after the planning meeting, the dev team is asked, okay, can you do this work in the next sprint? And so pretty much, this is what the dev team volunteers for, and this is what they're actually committing to deliver. And to me, this is the most important part of Scrum. And this is something that used to really confuse me when I first got started. Like, okay, we have a product backlog and we have a sprint backlog. Like, what's the difference? Well, the sprint backlog are the only items that are being worked on in the sprint. That's pretty much it. The product backlog encompasses the entire thing that the team will be building. But for the next 2 to 4 weeks, what's in the sprint backlog is what the team will be focusing on. And basically, this is just a screenshot of Jira. And this is showing where basically we have, in the planning meeting, the product owner put these 4 PBIs that they'd like the team to work on. And as you can see here, there's 146 items remaining in the backlog. So now, after the sprint planning part 2 meeting, if the dev team actually volunteers for these 4 items, then the sprint would start, and that would become the sprint backlog. And then this is a way, I really love Kanban boards. This is a program that I was running at BNY Mellon. And what this is showing is a Kanban board where basically each column represents a PBI, a product backlog item. And remember that when we made that breakfast, the subtasks are these Post-it notes. And this is when the dev team says, in order to do this work, these are the things that I need to complete. And as they do the work, these 3 rows here represent not started, in progress, and done. And this is a real live board. It wasn't really set up for this picture or anything. And so another way of looking at the board is at the beginning of the sprint, you would have the items identified, and you'd have the team sit down and do all the subtasking. And this is all the planning work they do right, as part of the sprint planning part 2 meeting. And so basically they build these items, and then as the sprint progresses, you can see during the daily scrum, they take the item and they move it down. They take this item and they move it down until it gets to done. And as things start moving down over your sprint period, you can see how you're doing. Now, what do you see here? Like, I love this type of thing because it gives me a very good insight. Like if I'm away for a couple of days or a week, I can immediately walk into the room and see what's going on. And does anybody see anything, or anybody want to volunteer what they might see? Okay, well, I could say, all right, this one here for release prep, nothing's really going on there, and that might be okay because we're not going to be doing the release, at the time I'm looking at it. And I could see here that this repo one seems to be progressing really well. This resiliency task, there's quite a bit not started, and there's quite a bit in progress. There might be a problem there, so you might want to start asking questions like, is everything okay? Is there any blockers? Is there anything that's stopping you from completing that? And so this basically just gives you, what I've done is, if my product owner's remote, is I take pictures of this board every day and I post it for them to share on Confluence so that they can see what's going on, what's being talked about. And the pictures nowadays are so good that you can actually zoom in on this and actually read what these what these subtasks are. So it's just, I'm not saying this is the way to do it. It's the way Bob does, and it works out really well.
And if I could supplement a little bit there, Bob.
Sure.
All Scrum says is visualize the work. And that is so important. So you can get in a Kanban board, and it works really well with it. Some people get into some tension with Kanban versus Scrum, or some hybrid thing with Scrumban. But all we're saying is really, again, make the work visible. And then with some advanced concept, you can get into WIP limits, which is work in progress, and that'll tell you where your bottlenecks are. So it's a great board, and it's a great tool.
And so again, this is following the same format where the product owner, this is, they don't normally attend the Sprint Planning 2 meeting unless the dev team might have questions where they could be requested to attend. It's really a meeting where the dev team, they're actually looking at what the product owner requested and actually volunteering to do the work. Just because the product owner asks for it doesn't mean the dev team has to volunteer for it. There could be vacations, there could be a lot of complexity where they might not be able to complete it in the sprint. And this is a great communications vehicle because after this meeting, the product owner will pretty much know whether or not what they're asking for will be able to be delivered in the sprint. And then basically, this is a pretty heavy lifting thing for the Scrum Master, where you have to schedule the meetings, you have to facilitate it, you have to facilitate the meetings to make sure that the developers actually create enough subtasks. I've found that working with my teams, they get a little bit lazy, like they might like to only put like 1 or 2 subtasks underneath each PBI. And I'll kind of recommend to them, I'd say, the more subtasks we have, the more successful we're going to be because you're actually identifying the work we have to do. And so basically, I'm there to help them do it, but I don't tell them to do it. And basically then I do some JIRA activity where basically I'll take things out of the placeholder, put them into the sprint, And I've come up with this items not picked placeholder where basically to make it fully transparent to the product owner what we can't handle. And then other JIRA maintenance is done. And then the dev team actually volunteers. They do all the volunteering. They actually set up this board, those Post-it notes. I don't write them. They do it. I'm not their secretary. They create their own subtasks. And basically what we like to do is have one developer volunteer for each PBI as the focal point, not meaning they're going to be doing all the work, but if there's any questions from the business or from the product owner. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Nitin?
There's so many different stories. Good summary, Bob. Sometimes you have developers who specialize in skill, work on a multitude of tasks or subtasks across so many different stories. And that's a good thing, you know, they're just trying to help out. So a lot of people like to say, hey, can this one developer be the point of contact for just a story and just hold this person accountable? You're actually isolating this person working in silos. Remember, we want to work collaboratively. So the team will eventually start spreading their wings and get into each other's space, but trust them, you know, is what I'm saying.
And did you hear that word, trust? That's a key word. That's one of the Agile principles that we're not going to be covering tonight. Trust them to get the work done.
Right. And sometimes we let people fall, because when you fall, eventually you're going to get up, or you need help getting up. We're there to help.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
So what are the motivating techniques that you use as a Scrum Master to motivate your team?
Well, that's a great loaded question. Are you familiar with Dan Pink? He's got a nice book and video on motivation and what motivates us. And he talks a little bit about intrinsic motivation. I think it comes a lot from truly trusting people, giving them guardrails in self-organizing, and ensuring that you have certain checkpoints to reflect. And those are your retrospectives, which we'll get more deep into. You're also going to want to have some safety checks, as in have techniques that you can walk into a room and feel the pulse and how things are going. And there are different ways of doing that as well. They say motivation comes from reward, but that's not entirely true. And I want you to think about that, and everybody. So I would just encourage looking up Dan Pink. He's got a great video as well to get people into a state of autonomy. Autonomy, mastery, purpose, get into that. There are other models like Tuckman that we hear about. Any team that's just starting off, they're going to have some areas of tension before there's some norms, and then they start performing. So a Scrum Master really needs to be able to feel the pulse of a group. And I would say work one-on-one with people. You're there to serve not only the organization and the product owner, but you as a Scrum Master are there to serve members of the dev team. So there's a multitude of things, but there's just a few ideas I'm just going to throw out. Bob, anything to add?
Sure. It's really having them take ownership. What I find is if you tell somebody something to do, rather than basically say, okay, this is what I want, figure it out, and then just give it to me in 2 weeks, it's a great motivator. And what I've seen with teams, like you have to lead with trust. When I was working at Teach for America, I had a back-end team that was afraid to make commitments because their culture was if they missed a date, they would get really heavily scrutinized. So I coached my product owner. I said, you have to let the team know that you want them to commit, and you won't, if they miss a date, it's fine. I'm not saying it's okay to miss all the dates, but it's okay if you miss a date here and there. And that team ended up like quadrupling their performance once that happened because they were so worried about getting scrutinized for missing a date. So it's really driving that whole trust idea and getting the team to really trust each other. And a lot of that, a lot of my work with the team, I do in the retrospective setting where the teams actually share their feelings, and I come up with, I have different techniques where I come up with ways where the teams could work better together, and so that they can really start talking. We'll get into that a little bit later as far as different retrospective techniques. So did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, now I'd like to launch the next poll. And if we can just do this in a couple of minutes, there's just 3 questions. The first one is, who's responsible for creating the product backlog? And what artifact contains the commitment of backlog items that will be completed in the sprint? And the last one is the virtual fist of 5 to let Nitin and I know how we're doing. And it's looking like we're getting, there's still some more votes coming in. Does everybody have enough time? Okay, let's end the polling. And so now I'm going to share the results so you guys can see. And as you saw, the person that's responsible is the product owner. The Scrum Master helps, and the dev team would provide input, but the ultimate responsibility goes with the product owner. What our artifact contains a commitment. Everybody got that right. To total sprint backlog. That is the commitment for the dev team. And thank you for your input. So far, we're getting 4s and 5s, Nitin. And let's continue now. So now we're going to discuss events. This is the last portion of the meeting. And so I guess, Nitin, you can start off.
Sure. So it all starts with a plan, right? And that's sprint planning. This is something that is also time boxed. As we say, it's held consistently at a certain point. They say don't start a sprint on a Monday, don't end a sprint on a Friday. So your sprint planning is going to be somewhere around, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And the reason for that is long vacations or people working remotely Friday. This is very important. This is where the Scrum Master is truly facilitating, hey, what's our velocity or our workload? What's the capacity? Who might be out the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks? And get some logistical things out of the way before we look at this wish list that the product owner wants to present. Ideally, you've got some things that are not new. You've seen them before in refinement, and you can just quickly estimate them. This is a good time to just have a quick say and say, yep, we know what this is about. Let's estimate, and let's say we can pull it in. And just for simplification process, you're just going to be repeating this. There might be some new work that has suddenly emerged. You want to just have the product owner discuss that. There could be some work that the development team members had questions about or were not sure about. And they say, you know what, we talked about this a couple of days ago, but now we have the clarity to move it forward, or we still have more questions. That dynamic can also happen. And again, you've ordered it. There's no high, medium, low. And there is, at the end of this, a collective sprint goal, which is what we're going to be focusing on over the next 2 to 4 weeks.
And then this is just an example, so a screenshot of a planning meeting. This is showing the 4 issues that the product owner would like to have discussed. And then there's different ways to get estimates. We're not going to spend too much time on it tonight, but as you can see here in Jira, if you're using Jira, this last column shows how many points the items are. And this is an estimating deck. They're available online, and they have a phone version, but I like to keep the electronics out of my team members' hands, so I have multiple decks of cards that everybody has. And what's interesting about this deck of cards is it doesn't go 1 through 10. It follows the Fibonacci sequence where 1 or 2 is 1 plus 1, 3 is 2 plus 1, 5 is 3 plus 2, and it goes all the way up to 100. And what's interesting about this is after 13, it no longer follows the Fibonacci sequence, because the person who created this deck says that after 13 points, it's kind of a wild guess anyway, and that's why it just goes 20, 40, 100. So what I use this for is it tells me if a story or a product backlog item is too big to be brought into a sprint. Like if the team comes back with 40, I know it's too big. Even a 20 might be too big. Like once I get the feel for my team, if I start seeing them picking up, 1 or 2 20s, I'm thinking to myself, we're not going to make it. Maybe the team might be able to do 120. And what you try to do is work with the product owner and break the story down into smaller pieces, maybe a 13 or an 8 or something like that. And this is just one technique of estimating, and it's wonderful. You don't deal with hours because once you get this right, you can be spot on as far as how the development team's going to deliver. Did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, and just to supplement what you said about numbers, metrics are always going to be floating about on any initiative. Just going to go a little off tangent. Your dev team members might say, hey, a 20 is like an epic. It needs to be broken down, right? And this could get a little into advanced concepts, into release planning or early estimations. Let's say there's a new initiative starting off. You don't have all that information. A Scrum Master could facilitate saying, hey, let's think about epic points, because we don't have stories. And epic points could mean, hey, let's say your epic is 20 points or higher. So you just get a quick snippet of things, and your dev team members could say, okay, this is a 20, this is a 40, this is a 100, knowing that they will break it down further down. But then again, given their past history or velocity as a team, they might be able to give a prediction of how much time this will take. So there are different ways of doing numbers, different techniques, and I just want to throw out both. It could be epic points or story points. Again, these are all going to be product backlog items.
And now, again, this is to summarize, and we're going to make this presentation available, after the meeting. So that this is something you can go back to. So now, and for sprint planning, as you know, we've mentioned, the product owner has to make sure that the items are listed in order of importance. There's no priority set. It's just an order. The product owner must be there. You can't have an absent product owner. This is one of the most important meetings the product owner should attend. If your product owner can't attend, you may want to think about rescheduling it. However, that's really bad because you want to get some type of rhythm. You want to do your 2-3 week sprints on a regular basis. Like say every Tuesday you start a sprint, every Tuesday, the third Tuesday you end it, that type of thing. The Scrum Master, their job basically is to do all the scheduling and facilitates it. And a way a Scrum Master can facilitate it is what they call a time box. So based on how many items you have on that you want that the product owner would like the team to work on, you have to make sure that the team doesn't spend the whole meeting time focused on the first item. So basically you stop the discussion, you either get everybody to agree that we don't know enough about this yet and maybe move it to a future sprint. And basically then you would do facilitate the estimating by the development team members. And basically the dev team, their job is to ask questions and provide estimates. Basically, that's their job. This is their chance to ask the product owner a lot of questions. And also at this meeting, you have stakeholders who actually are representing the business that could help answer questions as well. All right, the next one is the daily Scrum. And this is the most important. And as you can see here, the word daily, all right? It's kind of been mixed up. Sometimes they call it a daily stand-up, but it's really in Scrum, it's called a daily Scrum. The daily stand-up came from XP, extreme programming, like Nitin mentioned earlier. And during this meeting, the team does planning. And the reason they say daily, it doesn't mean Monday and Friday or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It means every day. And I've heard where teams take longer than 15 minutes. There is no reason where if you have eight developers, you cannot complete this meeting in under 15 minutes, basically because it's a planning event just for the developers. And so pretty much this is where we are in the diagram, looking at the daily Scrum. And so the way it's facilitated is a typical format is they would say, what did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? And are there any blockers? Now, a lot of people also confuse this with a status reporting meeting. This is not a status reporting meeting. It's actually a commitment meeting where the developers are committing among themselves what they did, what they're going to do, and if they need help. And basically, it's the most important meeting. If somebody misses it, they have to get caught up and they waste a lot of people's time. So the recommendation is if they can't make the meeting, they should send an email. And this is just an example when I worked at Teach for America back in 2014, where somebody on the team basically said, hello, this is what's going on. So that's it. It doesn't take much. It doesn't have to be a page-long email, just a couple bullets. Again, very concise to let everybody know what they're doing. So Nitin, did you have anything?
Yeah, so great slide here. Now, ideally, you want to have agreements with your dev team members that on such and such time every day you're going to meet. Otherwise, it's masking something. And this is also an example of team agreements. Remember, we were talking about self-organizing and what self-organizing meant? This is an example of a team agreement. It's not ideal, but collectively the team has agreed, hey, if somebody's out or cannot make it, we want to have some communication, and this is what it's going to look like. And I cannot emphasize enough, as Bob said, this is not a status meeting. This is not a report. This is a protected working hands-on session for the worker bees. If you are a traditional project manager, and I know you're well-meaning, and you have been invited to the daily Scrum, then there are a few tips I'm just going to throw out based on experience. As a Scrum Master, while facilitating the call, I clearly mark and say, the daily Scrum is now over. It is now an open session if anybody has questions. And I worked with a great project manager who said, hey, I got a couple of questions. Can I ask them now? And sure, I could answer the product owner or the deputy members, but I realized some of the artifacts were not visible or he didn't know where the backlog was. It's just some of the one-on-one meetings and the interaction. And that information and that interaction slowly diminished over time. And it was a good balance. But ideally, you just have the core dev team members doing a hands-on thing. And if they need the product owner, can come in. Again, it's not a status meeting. Back to you, Bob.
Okay, and then that was a perfect example. We do the same thing. We say the daily Scrum is over. And the other reason we do that is we let the dev team know they don't have to stay. When the daily Scrum's over, they can go back to their desk. But if they want to stay, they're more than welcome to. And it really helps a lot. I haven't had people leave yet, but we're just giving them that option. We're not saying you have to stay and listen to this project manager. So it's just another tool that you have the self-organizing team. Most of the time they're interested, but sometimes if they're really busy with something, they can just leave.
Yeah, or hear the Scrum Master. Maybe I chew people's ears and they don't want to hear my voice anymore.
Right, and also the Scrum Master doesn't need to attend. It's only the dev team that needs to attend. It's optional for the Scrum Master. And this is just a screenshot of Jira, and it basically shows.
Question on the.
Sure.
In a Scrum meeting, what happens if one particular team or a couple of people, they have some issues reporting or they have not covered? I know we can ask everyone else to go out and we can continue to discuss with them, or how will we resolve that?
What I would recommend is if it seems like it's going to be an involved conversation that doesn't really impact the whole group, I would suggest that let's table this and we'll talk about it after, and then have that small group get together. That's how I would see managing that.
If I could also support and supplement, you're getting into some team norms and agreements. Let's say you had your daily Scrum, the board was up, and something was missing or you couldn't find information. Ask the dev team, how do you want to address this? And this issue will repeat, and it is common between teams. There is no right or wrong answers, but for your Scrum team, you need to have some agreement in place as to how do we address this issue in the future as well. And I'm going to intentionally leave it open-ended for you to think about.
Yep. And then basically in summary for the daily Scrum, we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. The product owner doesn't need to participate. They basically, if they do, they need to wait until the end, or maybe a dev team member might ask them a question. That's okay, but they can't just start interjecting questions. If you're using a Kanban board like I showed earlier, they could see the progress. And if you actually teach them and explain to them what they're seeing, a lot of questions go away. And this was really cool. My self-organizing team, they're called the Swansons. They didn't have space for a nice columnized Kanban board, so they designed their own. And I just thought it was brilliant. They came up with this. I was kind of holding my breath, but like Nitin said, it's okay. Let them make a mistake. But this is the way they did it. They basically put all the items in the backlog in this section of the Kanban board. And then basically they put their initials in the middle. And then as they picked up the items, and each subtask has a number on it, so you could tie it back to the story. It's not ideal, but it worked great. And it also highlighted blocked items. It's just letting the team go. Just let them do it. The Scrum Master, basically you schedule it, but you don't need to attend. And if you have questions, like I'll do my announcements at the end, like there might be things going on that I want to share with the team. I'll give them at the end of the meeting after it's said the daily Scrum's over. And basically this is a development team meeting. That's their job. We've already covered these things. It's really keeping them all informed about what's going on, and they're committing to themselves, as I said. All right, sprint review. Nitin, did you want to cover that? And we got to speed up.
Right, sure. This is one of the key events as well. This is the fruits of your labor. You know, it's been a while. You've been working on something. What can we showcase? Did we hit our mark? Did we hit the target? And this is an opportunity to reflect and solicit feedback. A review is not a place for criticism unless it's absolutely needed or it's constructive. We had a sprint planning, we had some daily scrums, and now we just want to have a checkpoint. Where are we at? Did we do everything that we intended to do? And then showcase this to key stakeholders. And this is where you have your empowered product owner saying, given the backlog and our wish list, this is a piece of functionality. This is something tangible. It can be demonstrated, and it's ready to be deployed. So you don't have to deploy it or release it right away, but ideally you want it in that state so that it can be in the hands of your end customers as quickly as possible. And oftentimes you're going to get feedback from stakeholders. Yeah, I asked for that, but could I also get, or I didn't envision it to be exactly like that, maybe the UI, maybe the buttons and so on. We're welcome to feedback. And this is the beauty of Scrum. We're going to get that and put it back into the backlog and determine what value does it have. Is it something that can just be addressed in the next sprint, or is something that wasn't entirely complete that we should just carry forward? And that's what it is. You're going to have a quick inspect and adapt and say, let's see what we can do and capture in the backlog for the next sprint.
And then this is an example of an agenda. As the Scrum Master, this is how I set it up. Some items the developers actually demonstrated, but I always try to get the business to demonstrate it. If you can get an end user stakeholder to demo something, it's amazing the enthusiasm that they have in their voice when they start actually giving the demo. It's like they own it. It's like it's such a powerful thing. So you should always try to get the business as involved as you can in the sprint review. And that's what this agenda is showing. We're basically the different dev teams were doing their demos. This is the PBI numbers. And then this is what the business was demonstrating. Again, this is the way, I've been doing it, and it's really great. The more and more the business gets involved. And basically, in summary, for the sprint review, product owner must be there. They set the agenda. This is where I work with the product owner to help get this agenda organized. The product owner would be the one reaching out to the business to get them to do the demos. And they do the final approval. They say an item is done. Basically, the Scrum Master, here's a picture of the time box where basically you ensure that this agenda gets followed. And basically, as you notice, there was times on the left column. And that's something you have to keep in mind because a lot of times people get carried away on their demos. And then basically the dev team has to be able to provide demonstrations and basically give demos, give feedback, and just be part of the whole process. And then the final event that we're going to talk about is a sprint retrospective. And there's different techniques that you can use for a retrospective. And this is what I use for an icebreaker. This is called Express Yourself. And I did this exercise when a really well-liked product owner resigned very, very quickly. Like within 2 weeks, the person was gone and everybody was shattered. So I basically did this retrospective with the new product owner in the room, and people would put one word, they would put their feelings, if they were sad, if they were happy. And basically, I would then go around the room and the people would say what their word was and why they felt that way. And the product owner asked me if it was okay, and I said yes. That where basically the product owner wanted to respond to their comments. And to me, that turned that whole shattered team totally around. It made everybody more at ease because they felt much better because the previous person was beloved. He was great, very charismatic, really outstanding. I miss him. I still miss him, but this is just one way of capturing everybody's feelings. Another way to capture people's feelings is basically you have them write Post-it notes and put them in these quadrants called stop, less, start, keep, more, and what's in it for me. And what's really interesting is you getting the team members to talk about each of these quadrants. And as they're talking among themselves, and you can start feeling what they're what everybody's thinking. It gets everybody. Sometimes people don't speak without writing it down first. And what I do is I take a picture of it, and I actually then post it on our Confluence site, and the team can go back and reflect on it, because what we want to do is end up creating action items out of this. So what should the team be working on? What should we be doing? And it's just a really powerful exercise. This is called the mutant starfish exercise. And then if you're trying to do something really quick and dirty, you can just do this happy, sad, ideal appreciation exercise, where basically you get people going around the table and they just start saying, okay, what do I appreciate? I always try to lead with appreciation because I don't think we do that enough. So you basically get people to appreciate each other. And then what makes them happy, what would be ideal, and what would be sad. And then from this, you can actually generate action items as well. Because the idea is you want to generate action items that the team owns. You as a Scrum Master don't own the action items. You can help, but you don't want to sit there and start and collect 10 to-dos out of the meeting. You want to enable the team to say, okay, what is it we're going to work on? So pretty much, product owner, they need to be there, provide input. Scrum Master, you basically do the scheduling, you facilitate the meeting, and then these are the examples that I just shared. And basically the dev team has to attend. And it's a good time to give food. Like we have a budget where we buy people lunch. So that every 2 weeks the team gets lunch, and they like that a lot. And basically they're always putting that inspect and adapt. But that's going to be a future discussion as far as, the different things in Scrum and how it really works. But today we wanted to give you like a very solid overview. And then it's 7 o'clock, so we have a couple more slides. Is it okay if we continue? I'm very conscious of people's time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Bob. I'll have to drop off.
Okay, sorry. This recording will be available, and you could catch the end. There's only a couple more slides.
I have to go too.
Okay.
For those of you who are dropping off, you will get an email survey. Please fill it in and let us know how we can improve. Thanks.
So for those that want to stay, again, I apologize. We tried to get a lot into this 1 hour, but hopefully it's been beneficial to you. This last one is the product backlog refinement. And Nitin, do you want to cover that?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Okay. Pretty much this is not a formal event in Scrum. It's a recommended best practice. And basically what I do is I do it in the middle of the sprint. Like if I do a 2-week sprint, I'll do it after the first week. And what this does is it gives a chance for the product owner to actually talk to the dev team about what they're going to be working on next. And it's just a really good best practice. And it's not really, you don't have to have it. And if you don't do this, you're still doing Scrum. You're okay. But this is just one of those things to make Scrum better. And so basically for the PBR, definitely you need the product owner there. And then the product owner should be thinking about what they want to be working on next. So those are the items that you want the team to discuss. So they're moving things around in that backlog. And basically, ideally, what you do is you go into Jira, if you're using Jira, and just start at the top and just work your way down. And then basically, the product owner needs to answer any kind of questions that they might get. The Scrum Master, their job is to schedule the meeting, basically facilitate, and basically, if you have a lot of items that the product owner want to discuss, you might have to time box it. I've time boxed items to 3 minutes. I've been told that you can do it in less than that. And when you use that time box, the buzzer will go off after 3 minutes. And then basically you decide as a team if you want to continue the discussion or move on. That's really important. That's how you can get through a lot of items. Like if you do 3 minutes an item, you could cover 20 backlog items in an hour, which is pretty powerful because that gives the product owner a lot of information as far as how much work is coming up. And basically the dev team, they need to attend the event, provide the estimates, and there's different thought processes where you don't estimate during the PBR meeting. I kind of, this is Bob, this is not official, but I always try, if the development team can estimate it, let's get it estimated. Let's get that documented. But you don't have to. But then why, if you're already talking about it, it's fresh in everybody's mind, why not? And then basically the dev team would also identify non-functional requirements as well, based on the backlog items, so that the product owner knows that there's more work that's not really listed that has to get done, that needs to be documented. And now we're going to do some polling questions on Scrum events. And this is the last poll. Can you guys see the poll?
No, not yet. Yeah, we can see now.
Okay, thanks. The first question is, which Scrum event allows the product owner to prioritize what the development team will work on next? And now we're talking about events. And the next polling question is the PBR, the Product Backlog Refinement Meeting, a mandatory Scrum event? And then the last one is, how are we doing? Do we need a couple more minutes? I got 6 out of 11, it's 8. Almost done. We got 2 more people. 10. I'll stop it in about. Okay, I think we're good. Let's end the polling. Share the results. All right, so basically, which Scrum event allows the product owner to prioritize what the development team will work on? Sprint planning is it. The sprint review basically is when you're looking at the finished work. So the sprint planning event is where the product owner prioritizes, or really they order things. They don't really set priorities. Basically, you're correct. It's not optional. It is optional, I should say. The people that say it's mandatory, it's only a recommended best practice. And thank you for your fist of 5 voting, the 4s and 5s, thanks. All right, so now this last chart, how would a PMO interact with Scrum teams? So pretty much, I'm gonna do this real quickly. This is just one particular model. There's definitely, I'm not saying this is the answer, but basically you have a Scrum team. We have the product owner, Scrum Master, and the development resources, and they're working together as a team. Now the business users are giving the product owner information along with the BAs. So a product owner has a team. They have, like on my previous project, I had a product owner who had like 5 BAs working for him. So these BAs work with the business users as well as with the product owner to define the requirements. And then basically outside the box, you have development managers and functional managers. And now where does the PMO fit in? Well, basically the PMO, at least where I work, is they do progress monitoring and they provide process guidance and they provide the budget. The product owner is responsible for the budget, but the PMO is the one that does all the work to actually get the budget approved and get all the systems set up so that it can work. This is just one example of how, PMOs can coexist with Scrum teams. And as you see here, there's no project manager on the Scrum team. It's the Scrum Master. And now Nitin had a comment he wanted to make at the end here about this studio model.
Yeah, just some food for thought. There are some other models. So the Scrum Studio model, for example, which was brought forward by Jeff Sutherland, Ken Schwaber, in the book Software in 30 Days, says you can do away with a traditional PMO with what's called the Scrum Studio model. And to some people, that's baffling, how? But I would encourage you to just look it up. Also, what Bob's describing is just one snippet, one team, one organization. They're saying the traditional PMO is going to evolve in the future. And I think we should just be sensitive to that and aware as to what it could be. Scrum is intended to be lightweight intentionally, and they're starting to look into scaling now with not just one team, but a multitude of them, getting into programs and what it could look like and what that might look for traditional project managers and their roles as well. So we're not talking about the functions of project managers, but the actual title of the role.
Okay, that's it. Sorry we went 8 minutes over. So now would be time for questions and answers. And then before we lose you,